Good evening, everyone. If you will, you may want to open your Bibles up to Mark chapter 5. Mark chapter 5. We are looking at some things that are taking place in Jesus' life where he's really trying to build the faith of the apostles in particular. And so there's been a lot of teaching done up to this point that the apostles have been listening to. Do they understand all the teaching? No. So what have they been doing? They've been asking questions. And Jesus has been helping them to understand. But it seems that he feels like it's time to build their faith a little bit. And so leaving from the area of near Capernaum where a lot of teaching was done, he sails across going over to the other side of the sea. What happens as they're crossing the sea that night? Great storm. What is Jesus able to do? He's able to sleep during the storm. That's right. Yes, he calms the storm. And what effect does this have on the apostles? They were amazed. Who could this be? And what's the obvious answer? God. Okay, all right, so he has power over nature. Only God has power over nature. They arrive at the other side at Gergasa. Immediately upon landing on shore, what happens? Yes, actually two demon-possessed men. One's the focus. Legion, he has multiple demons inside of him. And what do the demons do? What do they say to Jesus? Yes, they beg him not to throw them into or send them into the abyss. And he gives them permission to go into the swine, and the swine run off the cliff into the... So what do we learn from that? What would the disciples learn from that? By the way, both of these are very traumatic events. One, they think they're going to lose their life in the sea. The other, I can only imagine what they're thinking when seeing this demon-possessed guy running down out of the caves, tombs to meet them. But what do they learn from this second? He has power over the spiritual realm, over the demons. So he has power over nature, his power over the spiritual realm. Who could this be? There's only one answer that comes up. Well, there's one more occasion that is linked with these three that I think even should raise our estimation of who this is more. And we'll cover that tonight. And so before we get into the new material in Mark chapter 5 and verse 21, does anybody have anything they want to add? All right, we'll get into the new material then.
All right, so picking up Mark 5:21. Now, when Jesus had crossed over again by boat to the other side, a great multitude gathered to him, and he was by the sea. And behold, one of the rulers of the synagogue came, Jairus by name. And when he saw him, he fell at his feet and begged him earnestly, saying, My little daughter lies at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her, that she might be healed, and she will live. So Jesus went with him, and a great multitude followed him and thronged him. So they had went across the Sea of Galilee over there to Gergesa, and now they have come back to Galilee, I presume, and it doesn't give us a specific location, but maybe the idea there, they're by the sea. Typically, we talk about that spot by the sea being kind of Capernaum area. But there's a large crowd there that receives them, which is its popularity has grown quite a bit. And so there's a certain man that comes to him named Jairus. Based on the text, what do we know about Jairus? He's a synagogue official, a ruler of the synagogue. And so from my understanding, kind of has watch over the synagogue and charge over it. And I don't necessarily think that means he's a Pharisee or anything. He could be. We don't know. But I think it's saying his position is to be a leader or an official over the synagogue. And so what's the petition that he comes to Jesus with there in verse 23? Save my daughter. She's to the point of death. And so think about that situation. We're reading it and maybe we kind of grasp it a little bit. But this is his daughter. And that means a lot more to me now for coming back to a passage like this, having a young daughter and realizing the severity of the situation, the seriousness of it. It's not a casual situation. It's very intense. And it's literally life or death, just like you made mention of. And in a situation like this, who's he go to? Jesus. And he's asking Jesus for help. In this crucial moment where he could go anywhere, where he would probably go in the most serious place he could go to the best help he could get, he's going to Jesus. What does this tell us about Jairus early on? Yeah, absolutely. I think it indicates the faith he has, and at least the understanding of what Jesus is capable of. And so I think that gives us early on an idea. And if you'll notice the language in verse 23, it even says when he goes to Jesus that she may be healed and she will live. He seems confident in Jesus, and that his language there backs up the faith that he has. Have we seen an attitude like this before? I think we have. What comes to mind? Any examples?
The story where the man said, he doesn't even have to come to my house. Just tell him, he can heal her, but he doesn't even have to be here.
Absolutely. I think it was a servant. It was the Roman centurion, had a sick servant. Yeah, but we've seen an attitude like this before. What did Jesus say about those same kind of attitudes? He said, I've never seen faith like this, not even in Israel. And so you get an idea that Jairus has a pretty strong faith there. Verse 24, Jesus goes with him, and a multitude is following him. So it's important to get that idea. He's headed there. There's a multitude with him. All right, now we kind of flip script just a little bit with verse 25. So now a certain woman had a flow of blood for 12 years and had suffered many things from many physicians. She had spent all that she had and was no better, but rather grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came behind him in the crowd and touched his garment. For she said, if only I may touch his clothes, I shall be made well. Immediately the fountain of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her affliction. And Jesus immediately, knowing in himself that the power had gone out of him, turned around in the crowd and said, who touched my clothes? But his disciples said to him, you see the multitude thronging you, and you say, who touched me? And he looked around to see who had done this thing. But the woman, fearing and trembling, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your affliction. And so this woman comes from the crowd, and what's the issue she has? Yeah, so a flow of blood is, I don't know exactly what that means, but I kind of understand it as an issue maybe of the reproductive system. And so maybe that's a bigger issue in itself, not just a health issue, but if that is what's going on, there's some law issues there too, some uncleanness that might be tied in with that. So not only is it damaging physically for health, but also socially. Lonnie and me were talking about this before class, and Lonnie made mention it almost should be kind of treated like a leper in a lot of ways, maybe in that sense.
This would, so in the Old Testament, when it talked about a woman's menstrual cycle, what, during the time that she was on her period, what happened? And everything she touched was unclean. Okay. So if she has some problem where that's not just, for a week or so, but continues on, can you imagine how that would affect your life? Where everybody you touch is unclean. Everything you touch is unclean. You would basically, it would be awful. It would be absolutely awful to be in that state. And as Collier said, much like a leper would be. And you would pretty much be ostracized from your family in a lot of ways because of that. So this is you can understand why it's a serious problem. How long has this been going on? 12 years. 12 years this has been going on.
12 years. And
that would be true. Not in this state. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. And so 12 years is a very long time to deal with a situation like this. Verse 26, how were her treatments going? They're making it worse. Yeah. And I don't know if it, the New King James words, it had suffered many things from her physicians. I don't know if this is malpractice or anything, but I think the idea is it wasn't getting any better. And so she's going to the people who are supposed to be able to fix her, the best resources, human resources she would have available, and nothing's working. It's only getting worse. But verse 27, she hears about Jesus, and she goes to the crowd, and what does she do? Yeah, she touches his garment. And what's the mindset behind why she touches his garment? Yeah, to be healed, she would be well if she touches his garment. So what does this tell us about the woman, about her understanding of Jesus? Yeah, she's got a lot of faith in his power, right? She knows the power he has.
Is this risky? Why is this a risk for her? because she's unclean. Yeah, if in this state she goes around touching people, she's gonna make a lot of people mad. And here's this teacher, this rabbi, this prophet of God, who I don't know what her understanding was other than God was with Jesus, but to touch him, to reach out and touch him would be a risk in that regard. And so she does it, I imagine, somewhat secretively in the way that she goes about this. And I think this kind of helps us to appreciate the reaction of what happens here.
And so when she touches Jesus, what happens? Immediately she's healed. It says that she felt in her body she was healed. And I love that idea. Here's 12 years of constantly seeing physicians and trying to get treatment. 12 years in just a moment. Immediately upon touching him, she's healed. And then Jesus is going to stop in the middle of all this and kind of draw attention to this moment. And Lonnie and I have had some discussions. It's kind of interesting when Jesus does and when Jesus doesn't draw attention to things. And at times, like there's times where he says, go and tell no one. And there's times where he literally just sets somebody up in front of people to make a point. Where the man with the withered hand in the synagogue, that's somebody that he made sure people, were watching in the crowd there. And then the woman's son, the widow's son in Nain, there was 2 large crowds there to see it. But then you have situations like the leper where he says, tell no one. And I don't know if I have all the answers for that. Sometimes I think it's appropriate for maybe the woman at the well or maybe the legion to help spread the word. But other times when it's among the Jews, I think it seems to be situational. There's times where the demons are the ones speaking. Maybe Jesus is on his father's timeline and he's saying, this is not a moment that I need to take an opportunity of. But I do think there are times Jesus sees teaching opportunities. And his whole goal is to teach the message, to teach God's word and teach others about the kingdom. I think this is one of those opportunities he sees that he can point out different things. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
No.
It is interesting to me that there would,
Okay, so verse 33, the woman, fearing and trembling, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And so Jesus, he stops the crowd and he questions her and, he says, who touched me? And his disciples are almost taken back by that. There's a whole sea of people here quite literally following you. And you expect us to know, who did that and for what purpose?
do you think she was crawling? Do you think she was on the ground?
So that's a really interesting question because I was looking for images. Every image that I could find has her on the ground. This text doesn't say that. Does anybody know? Does anybody have a text that says that she was? So I've seen some translations, and we have this idea, the hem of his garment, and so that makes you think, okay, the bottom of his tunic or whatever. And I don't know that that's necessary to draw that conclusion on it. So I wonder if that's the reason why all the artists, images that we see of that is where she's on the ground touching the bottom of his tunic or whatever. But I don't know that the text demands that.
Well, I imagine that she wasn't as big as the men, and there was a lot of people, so
Yeah.
that would be one way to get to her.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. That could be. It could be. I don't know, but I do know that normally it's depicted as she's on the ground. So I don't know if there's. Yeah.
So here's this stoppage. Jesus is on his way to Jairus' house, and he has this stoppage. He says, who does this? They're taken back. And he draws attention to the woman. He asks the question, who did this? And she answers. And that's when she is falling down, trembling with great fear, and she admits that she's the one that does it. The fear and trembling, what does that tell you about this moment, how she's feeling?
That's just respectful fear for him. I think it's being afraid.
Right.
Would she have a reason to be afraid?
Yes.
She was unclean and she just touched him, and he knew it, and so he turns around and stops and is like, okay, who did that? And it's like, whoa. But it is interesting too. I don't know that it's all just, oh, I got caught. I think the moment would be overwhelming regardless, because 12 years she's been battling with this. I know if I could just touch his clothing, I know that I would be healed. And immediately she feels that she knows that she is. And so that's overwhelming. And then Jesus stops and says, all right, who is it? First of all, it's interesting. Does Jesus know who it is? If he knows the power went out of him, I'm pretty sure he knows who it went to. And so the purpose of him doing this seems to be, as Collier said, to draw attention to the situation. Because who knows? Who knows that this happened? Just the woman and Jesus. And what's the purpose of miracles? To show who he is. So the purpose of the miracle really can't accomplish its purpose unless people are thinking about it, unless they know about it. And so it seems on this occasion that he does stop and draws attention to it so that people will recognize that something happened. And now he's saying, all right, who is it? Now, she doesn't know why he's asking who it is, but what he's looking for is for her testimony of what happened there. I think it could be. Yeah, I think it could be.
I think in a lot of ways he stopped it so she could give that testimony, so she can answer the question and he could give the response he gives for people to see. And so when she does admit the whole truth, and she's probably overrun with emotions, just like Lonnie said, verse 34, Jesus says to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your affliction." Now remember, a large crowd is hearing this, and they're recognizing the great faith of this woman has made her well. And so you could ask the question, well, what made her well? In a sense, Jesus made her well, right? It was his power that made her well. He's the one that healed her. He felt the power leaving his body. But also Jesus says her faith made her well. How did she demonstrate her faith? Reaching out and touching, right? Reaching out to Jesus. That's how she demonstrated her faith. And I think maybe you could say through her actions. And here's a moment where faith and obedience are working hand in hand. And you're seeing her great faith by her going out on a limb to rely on Jesus in this great moment of need, even taking a big risk. Socially, she's looking to Jesus and doing what she knows is the best thing for her in a situation like this.
In this act of faith, Jesus' reply to it is not, well, what were you thinking? What were you thinking trying to touch me in the state you're in? His reply is, go in peace, be healed. And so what have we seen about Jesus and how he views great faith? He appreciates it. He values it. And that's how God feels about faith. And he values it. He appreciates it. And so
it's a good message for us
mm-hmm.
to have great faith. And so you continue to see this trend of Jesus having power. Here's him having power over, the physical world as far as diseases and injuries and physical ailments people have to suffer with. That Jesus can easily, just by the touch of a garment, can fix those things. So we continue this idea of him having great power.
On the flip side, I imagine Jairus probably got a sense of urgency here, and then we're caught, this pause happens, and it's like, come on, we need to go, we need to go.
Yeah, that's a good thought to think about. So back to Jairus. Did you have something you were going to say?
Take verse 35, and if you pause there, I'll add it after verse 35.
Okay. Verse 35, while he was still speaking, some came from the ruler of the synagogue's house who said, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" You can go ahead.
Yeah, so come on, let's go. Time, this is urgent. That's how I think I view my request to God. God, this needs to happen quickly. Can you make this happen? Hurry, or it's going to be too late. And worse news that could come. It's too late. She's already died. All hope is lost. That's certainly the attitude of the people who bring the message. Don't bother him anymore because she's already gone. So from Jesus' standpoint, him tarrying here, turning around, calling attention to this, who touched me, taking the time to speak to this woman, all of that. From his standpoint, is he seeing this as, this is urgent, got to go right now. We don't have time for this right now. Is that how Jesus views this? No, that's not how he views it at all. Is he viewing it as, it's about to be too late? No, he's not viewing it that way at all. We haven't got to this yet, but do you remember when Lazarus is sick? Jesus hears that Lazarus is sick. Does Jesus rush to Bethany? No. He delays purposely. And what happens to Lazarus? Lazarus dies. Again, the reaction is, oh, if you would have been here, you could have healed him. Did Jesus feel this? Got to get there. It's going to be too late. Lazarus has been in the tomb 4 days. Did Jesus say it's too late? It's too late. All right. So the reason I point all of that out is Jesus is God. Here is our request, and we feel this intense urgency to get this done, or it's going to be too late. If this doesn't happen by this time, it's too late. God does not view things like that at all. If death comes, if another generation passes, if whatever, he can still do whatever he wants to do. And that, I don't know how to comprehend that. And so these type of when we hear accounts like this, I think it helps us to open up our mind just a little bit to start to realize, okay, so I'm viewing it this way. God is not seeing things from the same perspective. And so I need to have confidence that it can be okay whether it gets done in my lifetime or not. It'll still be okay. And so anyway, I maybe took some of what you were going to say, but
that was great. So imagine hearing the statement, if you're Jairus, and hearing the statement you get in verse 35. Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further? It would be gut-wrenching. It would be the worst news you could hear. It would be traumatic, and it would make you feel very strong emotions of grief and being upset. And then imagine you hear this, verse 36. As soon as Jesus heard the word that was spoken, he said to the ruler of the synagogue, do not be afraid, only believe. How do you think you would respond to back those two statements?
I am afraid, and I'm having a hard time believing.
Yeah, on the maybe two different ends of the spectrum there. Yeah, it would be tough. It would be. You would have to Austin said, "I already believed." You would have to have a lot of faith going into it to have that confidence.
Why was it easier to have faith that she's at the point of death, and if Jesus would come and heal her, she would live? But it may be more difficult to have faith that she is dead. We've seen people near death and recover. We don't see people when life has gone out of them come back. And so that's a whole nother level of we walk by faith and not by sight. Well, that's the deeper level of that.
Verse 37. And he permitted no one to follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. Then he came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue and saw the tumult and those who wept and wailed loudly. When he came in, he said to them, why make this commotion and weep? The child is not dead, but sleeping. And they ridiculed him. But when he had put them all outside, he took the father and the mother of the child and those who were with him and entered where the child was lying. So there's several different times in the New Testament you get kind of Peter, James, and John singled out. And I'm not really sure why. I know there's moments like the transfiguration where they go up with Jesus, or Peter's mother-in-law where they're the ones that come in too. But he brings those three disciples in, and what do they find? What's the scene going on inside the room? Commotion, there's weeping, there's grieving. The New King James says tumult. If you look that up, it's a loud, confused noise caused by a large mass of people. So it's a pretty intense, severe scene that he walks into. What does Jesus tell all these people that are causing this great commotion of grief? Yeah, and that's a pretty hard, a bold statement to make amidst this group of people.
It would almost come off as insulting.
Yeah, insensitive and insulting. Yeah, absolutely.
So have y'all experienced this? I know some of you have. You're maybe at the hospital. The doctor walks out. You're in the waiting room with the family. The doctor tells the family, I'm sorry. And you hear, or maybe you're not in that group, but you hear it from the other side of the waiting room, and you hear the whole family, just burst out with deep grief and emotion. Can you imagine walking over at that time and saying, oh, it's just fine. It's fine. It's fine. So was the child dead? Jesus says it's not dead, it's sleeping. How do you reconcile that? It's not permanent. And so he's putting it in language that they can understand of what's taking place here. We understand death as permanent. You don't come back from it. Jesus says that's not this situation. This situation is if the child's taking a nap. And so.
In verse 40, they ridicule him. And just like we were kind of talking about, I honestly think that's almost an appropriate response. You know, if you don't understand who this is and what he's capable of, if somebody did come to you, you might have that attitude towards them and ridicule them. And, you know, how could you say that in the midst of our situation? But verse 41, then he took the child by the hand and said to her, Talitha Cumi, which is translated, little girl, I say to you, arise. Immediately the girl arose and walked, for she was 12 years of age, and they were overcome with great amazement. Wow. So what did Jesus do? Yeah, he woke her up, right? He brought her back to life, or as we just talked about, he woke her up. So he enters, he takes her hand, and he merely speaks, and she is able to come back to life. So this is an amazing picture. You know, like in our minds, like Lonnie was saying, death is final. We see death as a final point. But Jesus is able to have power over death, to overcome death, and to really show everybody who he is, what he's capable of, and the kind of authority and the power he truly has in this moment. And so the people are taken back from it, you know, and rightfully so. You know, that says in verse 42, they were overcome with great amazement. Imagine how you would feel if you saw a little girl who was certainly dead, and here comes in this man, and he merely speaks, and she comes back to life. It would be this amazing scene, and you would have to recognize this is a divine being. This must be who he says he is. And they're amazed by it.
She doesn't have to have time to recover and get over it all, but she immediately gets up and starts walking.
Yeah.
That's where she goes.
Absolutely. Right. So you may hear about people in comas and stuff. Well, they're going to have to do a process of physical therapy, you know, to kind of get back to their normal routine. But she's instantly, you know, back to full health there. So that's an amazing healing. Verse 43, I like this. But he commanded them strictly that no one should know it and that something should be given her to eat. So this is one of those times where Jesus wants to conceal it for some reason, which is interesting because other times when he brought the widow's son back to life, he made sure everyone else saw it. Here he wants to conceal it. I don't really know the reasoning for that. Lonnie may have something to chime in with there. But I like the back half of this verse. He was concerned to give her something to eat. So I imagine in the midst of all this grief and then really an exciting moment, an amazing moment with all this commotion going on, everyone's just like, wow, you know, she's back to life. They're amazed by it. They probably forget that this is a little girl and she still has needs. And this is probably
hadn't eaten in a while, probably.
Yeah, something very traumatic she just went through herself. And so Jesus stops and he carefully considers her and cares for her and kind of points the family out to, you know, let's give this little girl what she needs. And it shows the compassion Jesus has.
Two parallels in these last two stories that we saw. How long had the woman with the issue of blood had the problem? How long had this girl been alive? Yeah. All right. So, I think that probably that is mentioned there because obviously those are details that are true, but also it links those in our mind. It helps us kind of remember that and to think about that, you know, here was a person suffering for 12 years. Here was a person that only had 12 years of life. And the person who had suffered for 12 years, Jesus was able to end that suffering. The person whose life had ended at 12 years, Jesus was able to restore that life. Secondly, there was touching that took place in both of these stories. And the contact with the woman with the issue of blood or contact with a dead corpse, both would make one unclean. And yet, again, we see this idea that with Jesus, it seems to work opposite. There's no defilement coming to Jesus. It seems that the power is flowing from Jesus and resurrecting, making whole, making clean, and giving life. And so those are interesting to put together there. Dealing with the question of why Jesus commanded that no one should know it. So with the woman with the issue of blood, the miracle happens. Who knows it? No one except the woman and Jesus. All right. With this, who knows that the girl's dead? Now, what's going to happen when the girl walks out of the house after Jesus just said she's not dead, she's only sleeping? What happened in there? Sorry, can't tell you what happened in there. They had to draw their own conclusion. But you see, here was something that was happening public enough that everybody had enough information to draw their own conclusion and to draw the correct conclusion in that. So maybe that's the difference in this. I'm not saying that I know all the reasons, but that makes sense to me. Jesus liked people to think about things and to draw the truth from what they could observe. When they couldn't observe something, sometimes he would give more details about it. But when they could observe things, he left it for them to figure out what's going on. And yes. Yes. Boy, and wouldn't you have some questions for that mom and dad when that girl walked out of there? I've got to know what happened in there. Sorry, I can't tell you. No, you've got to tell me what happened. I know she was dead. And yes, that's right. Very good.
So, I don't think this is necessarily a big deal, but I was thinking that he told them to give her something to eat. Spoiler alert. But later, when Jesus comes back from the dead and he appears to the apostles, one of the things that he does, I think, it seems like as proof that he is alive and they're with him, is he eats in front of them. And I wonder if that's maybe part of what's going on here too.
That
like another form of proof that she's like a ghost or something like this is her.
Yeah.
That would make sense.
Yeah, that's
Good thought.
yeah, good connection there. Apparently, Jews didn't believe that ghosts could eat, so
Yeah.
that's right.
So we see a lot of Jesus' power over the things we talked about. So we see power over the elements, when he calmed the waters, power over the spiritual, over the physical, and now probably the most significant, power over death. And it really puts into perspective who this king is and the authority he has.
Y'all have anything else in Mark chapter 5?
Yeah, good question. Why does it give Jesus' exact words in verse 41 and then the translation afterwards? Any thoughts on that? Why that's given?
No, I don't. I mean, we have a few occasions where that takes place, like when he was.
It's just hit or miss here or there.
Yeah.
It kind of points that out, but
Yeah. Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. I understand that because Eli, Eli sounded like Elijah. They thought he was calling for Elijah. But that's not what he was doing. He was actually quoting Psalm 51, the first verse of it. And so you have that makes sense to me why we needed the Aramaic and then why we needed the Greek translation of it. And but on this, I don't have a good explanation. Anybody?
Would this have been, I don't know the languages well enough, but would this have been like the language you would expect Jesus to speak normally? Or would this have been an exception here?
I don't know either.
He says this, I didn't know if this mentioned this, but he doesn't normally speak this language, but he did in this instance.
I assume that's Aramaic, but I do not know that, and so I would have to. I don't know. We got anybody in here?
It's just a memory of the writer.
Yeah,
The exact word or something.
yeah. I don't know.
Because I'm saying other versions don't have that. Luke has that.
Okay. I don't know. There may be some significance to it, but I don't know exactly what it would be. All right, let's jump over to Matthew's account now and look in Matthew chapter 9. Matthew chapter 9 in verse 27. So you see just above that you have the story of Jairus' daughter being raised from the dead. And then verse 27 says, when Jesus departed from there, 2 blind men followed him, crying out, saying, Son of David, have mercy on us. Okay, this is a pretty bold statement here. What do they call him? Okay, do they believe that he's literally the son of David? It's the way of saying Messiah. It's not just saying a descendant of David. There were a lot of sons of David from that standpoint. But when you use, this was the title, the son of David, they're saying you're the long-awaited promised seed of David. And does anybody remember where a promise was made about David's seed? Come on now, this is one of your flashlight points. Okay, Abraham, there was a promise for Abraham that through his seed all nations would be blessed. But I'm looking for the David one. 2 Samuel 7. That's right. Yes. By yourself. Okay, very good, Austin. Very good.
So 2 Samuel 7, talking to David here. When your days are fulfilled and you lie down with your fathers, I will raise up one of your seed after you. He will come forth from your own body, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be a father to him, and he will be a son to me.
So, have there been a lot of people that have been confident that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of David, or the Son of Man is another term that's used that way? Have we seen a lot of people that have been confident of that? Have we seen anybody? It's going to be later that Jesus asked the apostles, all right, who do people say that I am? Well, maybe Elijah or one of the prophets, or who do you say that I am? And Peter makes this really kind of out-of-the-box statement of you are the Christ, the Son of the living God, which, so we haven't seen a lot of that. Yes, okay, by prophecy, yes. By prophecy, yes. Yes, yeah, that's right. So we have, definitely. I'm thinking of people who have drawn the conclusion that he is. It's, the only thing that I'm making the point here is this blind man who can't see has a degree of understanding that most do not have at this point, and confidence in Jesus. And what is interesting is it doesn't seem that Jesus immediately, as much, we know how much Jesus respects faith. He doesn't immediately turn around and say, very good. Most people haven't caught on to that yet. You did great on that. Very good. It almost seems that he just ignores these two blind men at first. And what do they continue to do? They continue to follow him until he comes into the house. And what do? It seems that they are undeterred by this. In other words, we are seeking mercy, and it has to come from you. And we're going to follow you right in the house, and we're going to continue to cry out. And so when they've entered the house, Jesus said to them, do you believe that I am able to do this? And they said, what? Yes, Lord. Yes. And so he touched their eyes, saying, according to your faith, let it be to you. And what happened to them? Their eyes were open. So what about their faith? Was it genuine or not? Yeah, apparently it was genuine, because he said, in this miracle, it will depend upon your faith. Do all miracles depend upon our faith? This is an interesting question, isn't it? That's right. That's exactly right. We will see occasions where the person did not expect. They did not know. So it wasn't their faith, because they didn't have any concept of it. Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah. And I think we'll see quite a few examples, actually, of that. But sometimes Jesus says, all right, what will happen to you here will depend upon how much you believe it'll happen to you here. And on this occasion, that was the case. And so he touched their eyes. According to your faith, let it be. And their eyes were opened. And Jesus sternly warned them, saying, see that no one knows. And so, again, continuing that theory about with miracles that were obvious to everyone, then sometimes there was, don't tell anybody. Let them figure it out. Maybe that's one of the occasions here. People knew these guys were blind. All of a sudden now both of them see. How did that happen? We know, we saw you follow Jesus in that house saying, have mercy on you. You came out seeing. Tell us what happened. Sorry, I can't tell you.
The interesting thing is, in the next verse, they did the opposite.
They did the opposite. That's exactly right. Which Austin's made this point before. I think it's easy for us to have sympathy on them because, I mean, this is big news. This is the biggest news these guys maybe have ever had in their life. And how could you not tell somebody what happened? If Jesus said, don't tell anybody, what should you do? You should not tell anybody. And they do. That's it. They should be afraid of that, you know. He said not to tell. He may take it away. Yeah.
Wanted some people not to tell anybody, because he just didn't want his popularity to get that great yet, because he was ready for prison.
We know that there are other occasions where he told them and they went and spread it abroad. And then the very next thing would say, so he had to leave that area, you know. And so it made it where he couldn't work effectively there because there were too many people to be able to do the work that he needed to do.
Well, that's an interesting point, because I noticed one thing throughout the Bible. There was always a crush of people around him. Everywhere he went, he was just buried.
Yes.
And he couldn't even go off and hide.
Yes.
Somehow they would always find him.
That's right.
Yes, or something.
And you think about it, you think, well, wouldn't that be good? Wouldn't you want a crowd of people around him all the time? He's got 3 years, and he's going to be gone. Who's going to carry on that work? The apostles. He needs to be spending a lot of time with the apostles, building them up to carry on that work. And he can't do that if there's always a throng of people around him. And so that's the reason why he seeks to be away from them at times, is to be with the apostles and to be able to train them as they need to. Any other thoughts in this?
I just want to make sure I understood your question earlier. So earlier you asked me about, have we ever seen a time where a miracle is performed in the absence of faith? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Well, I mean, like in the last class we talked about that, right? So like when you have the storm and
Oh, yeah.
Jesus
Yeah.
stops the storm, and the thing he says right after is, why don't you have any faith?
Yeah.
And so I think
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's right. Very good.
I wonder if the very first miracle, when we turned the water to wine,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it was anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Mary had confidence in him, but nobody else knew about it. Yeah, that's right. Very good. All right. We're just about out of time, but let me cover this. And I'm not certain the way this is positioned here in verse 32, as they went out, that sure makes it sound like this is a continuation. But this is very similar to the occasion that we looked at earlier. And behold, they brought to him a man mute and demon possessed. And when the demon was cast out, the mute spoke, and the multitudes marveled and said, it was never seen like this in Israel. Okay, we've seen Jesus healed a demon-possessed mute man before, and people marvel at that. And immediately after the accusation is made by the Pharisees, he's casting out demons by the ruler of demons. Okay, because of the link here that Matthew puts in here, I take it that this is a different occasion. Same situation, different occasion. The Pharisees are using the same old argument. Now, Jesus has already answered that argument previously. What was his answer to the argument of, you're just casting out demons by the power of Beelzebub? Yeah, that makes no sense. I'm fighting against myself. If that's the case, that wouldn't work. And so here, no explanation is given. They're still making this charge because what else do they have? What other arguments do they have? They're out of bullets. And so they make this, but here no response is even given on this. And so,
Whether this is the same or different, it's still like the parable of the brats, the children in the streets, that you could offer anything to them, even to completely opposite things. They're going to reject whatever you give them. You know, they've already got their minds made up. It seems like their hearts are already figured out in this situation.
so all of these miracles, what is it attracting? A lot of attention, a lot of people. The crowds are building. We're getting to the zenith of Jesus's popularity right now. And we don't have time to get into the next verse there because our time is up. But verse 35, we see him as he's going out, is almost a summation of this Galilean ministry, how throngs of people are coming around him and how Jesus views that. We'll mention that next time as we get into it. But we're out of time. Thank you very much for your good attention. Appreciate the good participation as well. Thanks for watching. If you found this video to be beneficial, please follow us on Facebook or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Feel free to share it with others that you feel like may benefit from it. If you need to contact us, please contact us via email at quinn.church@yahoo.com. Also, if you're in the area, we would love for you to come visit with us at one of our assemblies. Have a good day.